Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. My guest this week is Larry Sprung, a husband, father, entrepreneur, award-winning advisor, author, and mental health advocate. Larry is reshaping personal finance by inspiring joyful conversations around money. Larry is the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Financial Planning Made Personal, and the host of the Mitlin Money Mindset podcast. Larry founded Mitlin Financial, Inc. in 2004 with a focus on prioritizing the families they serve. The Mitlin name illustrates their culture as the firm is named in memory of Larry's wife's grandfather, Mitchell, and his mother, Linda. Larry is a sought-after media guest and a founding member of the Investopedia Advisor Council. Now, this is Larry's second time on the podcast. I invited him back because in the past few months, I have both been seeing Larry and Mitlin Financial pop up everywhere, and I've also been talking about them a lot as a great example of great advisor marketing. Larry and his wife, Denise, have done such a good job of branding their firm. When I see the word joy, I immediately think of Larry and Mitlin Financial. They have done an incredible job of building all of their messaging around this concept of joy and making themselves known as the advisors who truly care about what brings fulfillment to their clients' lives. And that's just something that I feel is really different in this industry and is really making an impact. So in this conversation, Larry shares how they've transformed traditional financial planning conversations by focusing on joy instead of just retirement goals, and how this messaging strategy has become so distinctive that clients now incorporate joy language in their own communications back to the firm. We dive deep into Larry's multi-channel marketing approach, where he shows up consistently across his podcast, social media, email newsletters, media appearances, and now a YouTube channel. Larry also gets honest about the timeline for marketing results, sharing that they didn't see significant traction for almost 3 years, but emphasizing how marketing works like compound interest when you stick with it long term. Again, I love to bring advisors like Larry onto the podcast because instead of just hearing me talk about the compound interest effect of marketing, Larry and his team are actual proof that this stuff really does work, and it really does have a huge impact if you just put in the time. So if you have been struggling to differentiate your firm, or feeling like you need to be everywhere at once with your marketing, or wondering if you're ever going to reap the rewards of the work that you're putting in, this episode will give you a clear roadmap and lots of motivation for building sustainable marketing momentum over time. So without further ado, let's dive in. Larry, thank you so much for coming back for a second time on the Finance Marketing Podcast. I'm so excited to hear some updates with you and maybe go even a little bit further behind the scenes this time around some of the marketing that you've been doing. How are you today?
I am great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me again. And it's always great having a conversation with you.
Yeah, well, Larry, over the past, I would say 6 months to a year since we last spoke, I feel like I am just seeing you and Mitlin Financial everywhere. And I have to tell you, when I see the word joy, I immediately think Larry Sprung and Mitlin Financial. I think you guys have done such a good job of building all of your messaging around this concept of joy and really making yourselves known as advisors who care about joy. And so I'd love to hear you talk about, from a broad level, what that messaging means to you, and maybe kind of what it's done for you as a practice.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm glad what we're doing is getting out there, and you're seeing it, and it's resonating with you. So, kudos to our director of marketing, Denise, for really getting that messaging out there. And, I think one of the main things, right, in the world we're in today, where it's super divisive and there's a lot of, strong opinions in a lot of different ways, I think joy is something that really resonates with everybody, and people really feel aligned with that terminology. And, I think to your point, how and what you're asking about is we knew it was resonating really when families started emailing us back, or other people were emailing, hey, I did XYZ today and it brought me a lot of joy. Or,
Mm.
they signed off their email with the word enjoy, where the JOY was capitalized like we use in our marketing. So I think what we wanted to do really was, you know, in the day and age we're in, we wanted to add some humility to and engagement to people's lives, and make it more joy filled. And it really started with the podcast and the question that we asked each and every guest at the end of our show, which is, what did you do today that brought you joy? And that's where it resonated and, began. And we've really taken that now into the financial practice. So rather than talking with families that we're working with about money, because at the end of the day, the money is the money. It's just a tool, right? We're not working with families so they could just accumulate money for the sake of accumulating money. We're working with them so they can accumulate this money to utilize it as a tool to bring more joy to their lives, whether that's, working with a community foundation, or working and helping build a community center that their name could be attached to, or sending their daughter to medical school debt free, whatever that looks like, or their beach house and, sipping drinks on their deck on the weekend, whatever that looks like for them. That's what we're talking about. So we're taking the money out of the conversation to some degree, and we're transforming it into joy. And I think I know what it's done is really created more meaningful conversations with the families we serve. People have a better way of having a conversation with you when you start talking about joy than, what are you looking to do in retirement, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
question that they've thought about, they're inundated with. And, a lot of times, especially the further away you are from retirement, it's harder to think about those things and it's
Mm-hmm.
harder to imagine. So rather than that, we just flip the script and we say, okay, well, what brings you joy today? And if you had an unlimited, supply of funds, what would that joy look like in those situations? And we try to bring alignment to the money and the joy. And, like you said, and I think, it's really gotten out there. People are seeing it. It's
Mm-hmm.
caught on, and we've really leaned into the concept heavily.
You know what I think you've really done, Larry? And I think this is such a sticky point for advisors who are trying to figure out their messaging is everybody does have different goals. And so it's really hard to come up with messaging that is specific and that people can latch onto that's not vague. And so what a lot of advisors end up doing is say, we help you discover what your goals are, and then we help you reach those goals. And that's just not very compelling, right? People
Mm-hmm.
don't want to say, like, well, I need help discovering what my goals are and all of that. And what you guys have done with Mitlin Financial is you have created this really magnetic concept, I think, that everyone can really relate to and can see themselves in, just around this idea of joy.
I tend to agree. That's why we're doing it. And, I think that there's a lot of, what we call pundits out there, or financial figureheads that talk about finance all the time. And I feel like it's always in somewhat of a negative light, right? I was just quoted in in an article about talking about Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman, and how, when they talk about money, you have to give up all these things that they talk about so you can save for retirement and put this money away so you have an extra X number of dollars. Well, at the end of the day, that does not sound like a lot of fun, drawing from my personal experience, where I lost my mom at she was at the age of 47, and she passed away the day after my 23rd birthday. And losing my brother-in-law at 27, it really opened my eyes to the fact that, when we're talking to these families about retirement, especially when they're early, younger and early on, you know, there are a lot of people that aren't going to make it to retirement. So we have to figure out, what does joy look like for them? How do
Mhm.
we balance having a joyful life today and through and into retirement? and continue that joy throughout. And, that does not necessarily mean not going to Starbucks and paying $4 for a coffee. If you get a great deal of enjoyment out of that cup of coffee and you've budgeted for it and can afford it and it brings you joy, go right ahead. What do you need an extra $100,000 in your Roth IRA at age 65 when you may not make it there? My mom
Right.
didn't make it there. My mom and dad thankfully went on a bucket list trip to Hawaii a couple of years before she passed. Imagine had my dad said, you know what, let's not go on this trip. Let's put this money into our retirement accounts and we'll let it grow for someday. Well, someday never came. So I think that, although we have to be good stewards for the families we serve and help them reach those goals, I think that there has to be something to be said for joy and enjoying things along the way, for sure.
I absolutely agree. And when I think about, the Dave Ramseys and the Susie Ormans who are talking about saving for retirement for someday, even that the way that they talk about that retirement doesn't spark a lot of joy in me either. Even saving for that someday that, like you said, may never happen, it still feels like I'm going to have to be so frugal and so careful and not to overspend and, just
It
be
sounds
happy.
miserable.
It sounds
It
horrible.
sounds terrible. It sounds like there's nothing to enjoy by plowing every amount of excess money that you have into your mortgage to be debt free,
Hmm.
earlier. And listen, I agree with them on some points, right? They would say to some degree that, any debt is bad debt. I don't agree with that. I think that there's different debt has different degrees of whether they're good or bad. Credit card debt, bad. Mortgage, probably good in a lot of cases, especially those people who have 2.99 or 3% loans. They're
Right.
never going to see those again. Maybe not a great idea to pay those off early. If you have a student loan to help educate yourself better and you're going to be laser focused and moving into a career that you're going to be able to recoup and pay back that loan rather quickly because of your increased skills, may not be a bad idea. On the other hand, if you're going to college, have no idea what you want to do, and you're going into a role that you're probably going to take 20 or 30 years to pay back that debt, maybe not a good idea to do that. Maybe a better idea to do other things. So I think the point is that there's not one way to do this, and it's not an all or none. And I think some of these folks that talk out there, and when they speak about these miserable things, or what I think creates a miserable life, it's usually it's an all or none scenario. Everybody's got to do this or everybody's got to do that, and I don't think that's the case at all. I think everybody has their own path to joy, and it's just a matter of figuring out what the family's specific path is and helping them walk on that path in a way that's going to get them from where they are today to where they want to be in the future, and experience that joy all along the way so that they can live life to the fullest.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about all the different places that you infuse this messaging of joy, because I know that you have said to me before, and I think this is such an important perspective, is that you don't just market in one channel, right? You are showing up in all of these different places, and they're all kind of feeding into each other and creating this great ecosystem for Mitlin Financial to disseminate that messaging. So, can you give us a broad overview? Where are the places that you are showing up?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because I think as advisors, at least the ones I've been exposed to in my career, are typically looking for that one thing that's going to elevate their practice. And I don't think it's ever one thing. I don't think one thing does it. So I think having a multi-channel approach like we're talking about is something that is vitally important. And you don't want to release all these channels all at once, but slow and steadily start leaning into them, and as you have it more process oriented, move into the next one, et cetera, and then you have to see what's working better than others and lean into those maybe a little bit more heavily. So if you look at where we're at, we had a book come out, or I had a book come out in 2023. I'm not doing this in any specific order, as you'll see in a minute. 2020, we had our podcast launch. We also, recently in the last year or so, started really heavily moving our podcast, not only from the audio channels, but also YouTube. And then we're very active on the social media front as well as public relations in terms of being in the media and on, as a thought leader on news stations, Yahoo Finance, New York Stock Exchange TV, NTD News, various others, as well as trade publications for advisors. So I think all those are channels that we're heavily invested in and are working. And later this year, we're making a significant investment into creating a YouTube channel that's going to be a different one from the company. It's going to be in my name only, Larry Sprung's, Larry Sprung, my name only. And we're going to be launching that probably in the late third, early fourth quarter, in terms of creating more longer form content, maybe 5 to 10 minutes with some shorts attached on topics that kind of are important to the families we serve and the types of people we serve. And really, this came out very heavily out of an advisory council that we had with some of the top families we work with. And one of the things they wanted to see or were interested in is if we had a YouTube channel that had this information, they would be super happy sharing it with their kids and grandkids, and they felt that they would consume that. Where other channels they didn't feel would resonate with them or they'd be interested in. Podcast was too long, for example. So I think those are the major channels. And I think once we have the YouTube channel launched, we'll probably have every avenue covered. And I think it was a slow and steady rollout. If you look, we probably leaned into, one or two of those things every year or so, until we had the process down and knew how to dive a little bit deeper into each of those.
What was the very first thing that you started with?
That's a good question. We're probably on the social media front. We were probably, a little bit different than we are today, but we started out there slowly, trying to identify the channels. And it's kind of interesting because I know everybody kind of has their preference on what channel works the best for them. And I know a lot of people in financial services or the financial profession, talk about LinkedIn or Twitter, now X, as heavy drivers for them. For us, we've gotten a lot of traction on Facebook. And I think the reason for us getting a lot of traction there is I'm very open and forthcoming with sharing a lot of my personal story. And really what we want to attract is other families that are family oriented like we are. And that's some of the feedback that we got from the families we serve, that some people are like, oh, well, I was watching you for 5 years, 6 years, and I saw you raising your boys. And, if somebody could raise kids like you've raised over the last 5-10 years, you got to be good at your profession too. So we find that for us, Facebook is a big driver. Not that those others aren't, but that's been a huge channel. So I think we started there, leaning into that, not as heavy as we are today, but that was probably, our toe dipping in the water was there first and foremost.
So are you on Instagram now as well?
We are.
Yeah.
The only avenue we're not on is TikTok for the time being, because there's some compliance challenges there with archiving. So right now we did reserve our handles on there. So if that does change, but for right now, that's pretty much the main, out of the main social media channels, that's the only one we're not on.
Well, and then one that I don't think I heard you mention, but I know I've heard you talk about before is your newsletter, your email.
Yes, we do have a newsletter that goes out every week to
Mm.
the families we serve, and we typically have a market overview in terms of what happened in the markets over the last week, what we see coming in the next week. There's usually some kind of educational component to it, some kind of call to action or some kind of downloadable guide, or, like we just did something like the 10 big points out of the big, beautiful bill, something
I
along
saw
those
that.
lines. Yeah. And then we also and then usually one other component is either a podcast or a media appearance or something like that, that we share with the families we work with, as well as those that have signed up or considering working with us.
Mm. Do you do anything with email beyond the newsletter? Do you ever do any campaigns to get some of those, people who are not clients yet to book discovery calls, or is it just kind of a way to nurture them ongoing in their inbox?
Yeah, we do not do anything direct to them other than the newsletter. There is that call to action that if they have questions or concerns or they want to schedule a is there a fit meeting that they certainly can. We're seeing a lot of inquiries really I think coming from we're getting a lot of inquiries from Google, for example. That's driving because we do, I guess, one other method that we didn't talk about is Google reviews. We are using those. So we're getting activity through there as well. But we do not do anything specific like target marketing from an email perspective per se.
Mm. Well, I've also seen you kind of related to Google reviews. I've seen you on some wealth tender posts
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Do you use testimonial marketing?
We do. We're a big fan of Wealth Tender. We're subscribers. I'm a big fan of Brian Thorpe and him as a person and what he's doing with his company. I think there's a lot of great stuff that's going to be driven from there. So that is super helpful. And I think it's also helping drive that Google traffic, the reviews, and then that being on the Wealth Tender platform as well. So, I think that that's an area that even with us, I think we're a little behind the curve. I think we could do more with it, and we are trying to. It's just it's less in our control, right? Because we have to basically ask the family, hope that they log in, make that review if they feel comfortable. So yeah, that testimonial marketing is huge, and it works because we just had a family an opportunity for about $2 million that reached out to us through Google. And really, they found us because they did a search. They looked at our reviews and they were like, hey, if you're getting reviews like this, we're interested in talking to you. And,
Mm.
there were plenty of firms on Long Island in our area that they could have also found. And I'm sure many of them do not have anywhere near the number of reviews that we have. So that has become an impactful piece to the conversation as well.
Mm. Okay, so going back to this idea that, you have multiple channels that you're showing up on, how are those channels, I suppose, complementing and feeding into each other? Is there continuity between them? Do they drive people to other channels where you're showing up? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I don't think, as things stand today, I think you have to have I think the whole call to action, in my opinion, is not necessarily as needed as it was maybe 5 years ago. And,
Mm,
and the reason why I say that is think about yourself, right? If you get a newsletter, you get an email, you hear something about somebody, whatever that may be, before you click that call to action, you're probably not, if it's the first inquiry, you're probably not going to hit that call to action at all. So maybe you're going to see them a couple of more times and then you're going to go on Google and maybe Google them or go on
mm,
LinkedIn and see them. So I don't think that the need for that call to action per se is as important as it once was. I think it should be included because there will be a handful of folks that will just get driven to that call to action if it's something that's super interesting to them. I think the
mhm,
important thing there is it has to be super easy at that point of entry, meaning do not ask them more than name or email. You
mm,
haven't earned the right to probably ask them more than that. Once they get in your system, you build more of a relationship, then hopefully you gain the right to ask more information. But I don't know that that's as meaningful because we've had people that, have found us on Google or found us on social, then check us on Google, and then listen to the podcast, and then sign up for the newsletter, and then maybe check out our YouTube channel. And I can't say that there's a direct mapping to say, hey, this is how the funnel works, and they go from this channel to this channel to that. It's really a random walk for everybody, and you just need to have the movement in terms of having engaging content and engaging information to keep moving them down that continuum to hopefully just continue learning more till either they decide that they are somebody that is aligned with you and want to reach out to you to schedule a time to chat, or they self-select out and come to a point where they're like, this is great information, but you know what, this isn't for me. And I know advisors are probably cringing because they're like, we don't want to drive people away, but you do, because at the end of the
Right.
day, you would rather drive them away at that point than spending 2 or 3 meetings with them and then them telling you you're not a good fit, or you deciding there's not a good fit. So it's much easier to do it there and use that as a filtering device to, get the right people onto your calendar so you're having conversations. So I know that's long-winded. I wish there was like an easy path to say, but I think that everybody has their own path, and some people start in different places, right? I might like podcasts. I listen to podcasts and or books in my car all the time. So like I just downloaded a book, listened to the book. It really resonated with me. So I went online. I ended up buying the book because I wanted it to go through it again. And then I reached out to the author on LinkedIn to connect with them because I want to follow. And now I'm following more of their content. So, that's a great example. And it's no different for that person than for our profession. They're all very similar.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great answer. It sounds to me like the strategy is really just this kind of omnipresent. We are all these different places. We have all these different places for people to interact with us in the way that they best like interacting with
Yeah, you want to you
content.
want to be there as an advisor, in my opinion. This is the way we look at it, right? You can't create a challenge for somebody, right?
Mm,
Many of these people are going to your website, they're interacting with you. In those very moments, they may not have any challenges, or at least they don't think they have challenges. They may, but you only know what you know. So they may not think they have any challenges. So they may see in their mind, hey, there's no reason for me to reach out to Mitlin Financial because I have no reason to. But what you
mm,
want to do is you want to be there. You want to be in their feed. You want to be in their ear. You want to be in front of their eyes. So when they're in the shower at 6 o'clock in the morning and they're like, I don't know if I have enough money to retire. What does retirement look like for me? And they're like, you know what? I'm going to call Larry. I need an answer to this question, right? You
mhm,
want to be there in that moment that they're feeling like they have a challenge or an issue. And when they think about who can help me to solve it, you want to be there in that moment and have them reach out to you. And the way you do that is by, being in front of their eyes, being in their ears, and being in their inbox, right? And
mm,
sharing, why and who you work with.
mm. Well, one last question for you, Larry. As we kind of start to wrap up, I know you mentioned that you didn't start showing up on all the places at once, right? You would show up on one, get good at it, build a process for it, and then you would build in the next.
Mhm.
As one person, and I know you have Denise and other people on your team, what is your best advice for somebody to not get totally overwhelmed by needing to show up on all of the places?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's difficult because, we all want results, whether we're advisors, business, we want results. And it's so hard to drive results and really tie back even some of the results to something specific that happened, right? Even today with the multi-channel approach we've had people say, when we ask them, how did you find out about us? We've had people say, well, I was talking to somebody, they gave me your name and I wrote it in my phone. I typed it in my phone. I have no idea who even gave it to me. Or they were online and they're like, I don't know. I don't remember if it was a podcast or they don't even remember. So it's hard to really pinpoint. So my answer for this would be find something that you feel comfortable doing, in terms of what you feel the time commitment would be, what you feel the effort would be. Like, for example, a podcast may not work for everybody because they may not have the time or the financial ability to outsource it if they don't have the time to
Mm,
invest hours of recording, hours of editing. So maybe that's not the best. Or maybe somebody does have that means and that might be the best. So I think you find what you enjoy,
mhm,
the most. Do you enjoy sharing on social? Do you enjoy being on video? Do you enjoy being in the media? Whatever that is. And then do you have the time and the ability to commit to do that? And then just start doing it, and don't do it unthoughtfully. Put a thought process into it, have a game plan, have topics, have ideas that you want to share, and keep a running list, and then just utilize that over time and lean into that one channel. And then see over time, what should happen, I believe, is because you have a process and you have it down pat, it's going to take you less time and effort to do the same thing. So then when you're in that process where you're doing that very, on almost autopilot, then you can figure out that time savings, and then where do you want to redeploy that time to the next channel, and then kind of go through that same process. What do I enjoy the most? What do I have the time, effort, and energy to do, or the bandwidth to bring in to help me, and then go into that channel, right? Listen, my book, I wanted to write it for 10 years. I just did not have the time. I had two boys. My wife and I were very involved with them in hockey and family. I just didn't have the time to do the book. The minute my boys went to college and went away to prep school at the same time, and we had found a lot more free time, that's when I leaned into writing the book because I had the time. So I would have loved to do it 10 years earlier, but I just didn't have the time to do it. So yeah, you have to pick your battles and then lean in. Once you pick that battle, lean in and don't give up. I know we all want results, but it's really like a real compounding effect. It's like compound interest, and all advisors understand compound interest. It's the same thing with marketing. You have to compound your marketing.
I love to hear another advisor say that, because I feel like I say that ad nauseum, but it just carries so much more weight when an advisor says that. Right? It's compound marketing.
Yeah, I mean, we lived it. I mean, listen, we didn't see results. We didn't see results for almost 3 years from a lot of our efforts. And I will tell you now, we're 4.5, 5 years in, and it's generating a lot of results to the point where we're growing faster than I ever thought we would, and looking to add additional advisors to our practice because of the depth and breadth of how we're expanding.
I want to call back one thing that you said, because I think it was so brilliant, and then I'll let you share where people can find you. But you said, start with one thing. I think for a lot of advisors, that is social media, whether it's LinkedIn or it's Twitter/X or Facebook or whatever. Get really good at that one thing for maybe a year. Then if you can outsource that to somebody else because you have a process and a system and you can teach somebody to do what you've been doing, that's great. And then do the next thing yourself rather than, I think, outsourcing the next thing. I think there's so much power and value in doing it yourself first and then bringing in someone to help you do it the way that you've made it work for you.
Yeah, the only caveat I would say is on social, you better make sure that whoever or whomever you outsource to, you want to make sure that they can write and express in your voice,
Yes.
right? Your authentic self, that they understand who you are and what you want to talk about and how you portray that. Because otherwise, what'll end up happening is if it's not you on social, when people start inquiring and meeting you, there's going to be a disconnect. They're not going to align those two things. So it has to be authentically you and your voice.
Yes. And I think outsourcing social, it is challenging because you still have to be in contact with the person who's writing for you quite often, so that they're not just writing, generic content for you. It still needs to be very personal to you with all those personal details that only you really know.
Agreed. And that's easy these days. You make a little voice note, send it, if you want a couple of posts, send that voice note, kind of the point and the voice you want, and then, have somebody wordsmith it for you.
Yep. Well, Larry, this was so great. If people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so the best place would be to go to joyfuladvisor.com. We're going to be sharing our success around the joy infusion in our practice and how that's transformed our practice, and share a lot of these golden nuggets with other advisors. So we're going to be doing that in a free webinar. So if you go to joyfuladvisor.com, give us your name and email address, we'll put you on the wait list, and you'll be first to know when we come out with the webinar, and we'll be sharing these secrets and topics with you and how this has transformed our practice and how you can think about, infusing it in your own practice to elevate it as well.
Awesome. Well, I will link to that in the show notes. Thank you again so much, Larry. It was great to have you back.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.